Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. We have a really amazing and life-changing miracle to talk about today. Let's assume the names of the 2 people involved, because this is a true story, but we're changing their names. Let's assume that the woman, the wife's name is Mary, and the husband's name is Francis. So it's a story of Francis and Mary. And I know the people personally, and I know other people who know this story is true. And I think it's really a precious story, amazing, life-changing, and great faith-building. So here's the story. Mary and Francis were married for about 10 years, and Francis developed a terrible drug habit. It was all-consuming. It got worse and worse. And for about 10 years, Mary had, tolerated, coped with the very difficult life that this all produced. And finally, after, I guess it was maybe 6 years, because around 16 years after marriage, she just decided she couldn't take it anymore. The abuses and the confusions and the lies and the cheating, all kinds of terrible things were happening. So she decided she just couldn't cope with this any longer. She had a pretty important job as well in New York City, and that was falling into jeopardy as well, because his problem was affecting her life and her daily workflow. And so a lot of people were putting up with things, a lot of people were coping, but she finally just got to a breaking point. So one day she left a note on the table. She took some of her belongings, and the note said, "Goodbye, I can't take it anymore, this is it." And she was driving from New York to Boston. She was going to stay with a friend of hers in Boston, and that was the plan. So she gets to her car, and she starts to drive off to Boston. I don't know the exact duration of the trip, but based on approximately, I think it probably ran a 4-hour drive. So while she's driving this 4 hours, she's reflecting on her life, and she really loved her husband. They had a wonderful life for the first 10 years, and they were kind of the model couple. Many people used them as a model and praised them. They were really very much in love. And those are my fond memories of the couple as well. So she was, sad and crying and frustrated and perplexed, and she's driving this 4-hour trip, and all the while she's talking to God, and she's, sorrowful. She feels sad. She feels like she's letting Francis down. She's not sure what God wants her to do. And while she's driving, she's hoping she's going to get some clarity of all these things she's asking. She thinks she's doing the right thing. And when she gets to Boston, she crosses over the connector. I guess she went through Connecticut, so between Connecticut and Massachusetts, she's getting close to Boston. Finally, in desperation and extreme stress, as she was telling us the story, and Francis was listening to the story while she was telling it, so he knows it's true, she said that all this time, maybe 3 hours or so, she's been trying to get clarity from God, and she's not getting it. She's very frustrated. So from way down deep within her soul, she spiritually yells out in her soul, God, I need to know what to do. I need to know, should I go back to Francis or should I keep going to Boston? And as soon as she said that, with great passion, it was like her whole being, every molecule in her body was crying, please, God, show me, should I go back to Francis or should I keep going to Boston? And as soon as that happened, she almost got hit by an oncoming car. It came out of a side road, and both cars slam on their brakes, and they're spinning in the highway, and there's smoke from the tires spinning, and they had a near accident, but they did not hit each other. So there they are. After the spinning stops, she notices on the back of this SUV that the model was Francis. And I'm just making that up. I don't want to reveal the man's name, but so you'll understand. The man's name, what his real name was the title of this SUV model. So you can assume his name is Francis, and the model of the SUV that she almost hit was Francis. And the license plate on this SUV was Frank, F-R-A-N-K, Frank. So right at this moment in time, when she's yelling in great desperation from inside her soul, after 3 hours of driving, she's yelling inside, please, God, show me, should I go back to Francis or should I keep going to Boston? And at the split second she says that, this SUV arrives almost hitting her, but they don't collide. And the license plate says Frank, and the model of the SUV is Francis. So she said she was instantly overcome. The nature of her job and the nature of her work, I can't tell you because I don't want to reveal who she is, but the nature of her work makes her very adept, very quick-minded. She sees messages constantly in her work, and she has to interpret them quickly. She's been doing this for many, many years. She sees evidence of things, and she has to decide quickly what is that evidence telling us and make decisions split second. So she was very used to, and God knew this, so God sends her this message, and in 1 second she knew what it meant. It meant turn around and go back to Francis, go back to Frank. And that's what she did. She didn't finish her trip to Boston. Now I want to point out something that's really quite amazing. If she did not leave her house at the same time that she did leave, she would not have arrived at this place where the SUV was traveling, apparently 50 miles an hour, as I understand it, and she was at 50 miles an hour as well. But she would not have arrived at that moment where the SUV was if she didn't leave her house at the right time 3 hours earlier, and furthermore, if she didn't follow a certain speed, hopefully following the speed limit, but if she didn't maintain that speed all the way over, she would not have made it at this moment. So I'm pointing this out because when we talk about coincidence miracles, that's what we're talking about. Here's evidence that God orchestrated what time she would leave her house. God orchestrated the traffic flow, the congestions, the backups, all the complications of trying to drive 3 miles through Connecticut. I'm certain there were places where it was bumper-to-bumper traffic. So God orchestrates and calculates all of this so she leaves her house at the right time. And he's doing the same thing for the SUV, which arrives at precisely the right moment. So this is how intricate these coincidence miracles are. Now, the blessing of this story is they've been together now about 15 years since that day, and they were both telling us this story. and they have had the most wonderful marriage ever since that day. She, for one, knows that she went back and God was with her every moment of her marriage ever since. And he knows the story, and he knew it all these years now, and so he knows how wonderfully fortunate he is that God told her to come back. She's a wonderful wife, a wonderful woman. He knows that. They're just both wonderful people. So he looks at her every day and thanks God for her and for God sending her back to him. Our next story is about a man who was led about, I don't know what time it was, but midday somewhere, while he was working, doing some things around the house. He was inspired to stop what he was doing and to go over to the local church and pay his respects to God and have a visit with God in one of the local churches. So he drove over, and as he was driving over, he noticed a car coming toward him, and it had a license plate number 777, and he relates that he sees this often. He often sees 3 sevens, which, as we know, is the number that stands for God. It's the famous number in history that reminds us of God's power and his presence. So he was inspired that, God must be showing him that he's pleased. He is coming over to the church, and when he gets to the church, he pulls in the driveway, and there's a car parked right at the entrance to the driveway. He couldn't miss it, and the car parked right there at the entrance had a license plate number 444, and that number in history is significant because it reminds us of the holy name of Jesus' mother Mary, the Blessed Virgin Mary. So this is a man relating to the fact that he's inspired to go visit a church, and he sees 3 sevens on the way over, and he sees the number 3 fours as he's pulling into the driveway. Pretty significant evidence of the fact that God had called him to come for a visit. Our next story is about a man who was inspired one day. He was asking God what to do about things, and he was inspired to take some of the phones. They have phone extensions where he works, and several phone extensions that malfunction. Turns out that they are battery-operated phones. You can pick up the phone and walk around with it once you pull it out of the holder, the phone holder at the office. And so a lot of people are walking around with them, but the batteries over, a 5-year period need to be replaced. And so he's inspired to take just 2 of them. There were 4 that he could take, and he was thinking I should take the 4 over and get them replaced. But he was inspired, no, you'll only need 2. So he winds up taking the 2 the oldest batteries that were there, trusting. And if he got there, if he changed his mind, he figured he could get some more when he got there. But it turns out when he got to the store, for the model that he had, they were apparently old phones. For the model that they had, they only had 2 batteries left. They had sold out, and they were discontinuing the batteries. So they only had just 2. So his inspiration and his joy was that because he had asked God what to do, he was told on this particular day to go. I guess the next day could have been, just 1 battery there. And he's told to just go for 2 instead of 4, and it turns out there were just 2. Now this is what happens when you ask God what to do. Then the things that happen to you, you notice they are coincidental miracles. But just like the story of Mary and Francis a little while ago about that SUV that almost collided with them. I mean, Mary knew that was God talking to her, and this man knows it was God talking to him about the batteries. So once again today, like I try to stress every week, the important fact to remember is that God is talking to us. When you ask him questions, he's talking to us, and that's how we know, because of the results that happen, which are miracles. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.